interesting how we as children, and even as adults, we can admit that, are enthralled by magically extra tall humans? Wow, they're so tall! This is why the psychology of entertainment fascinates me. I like to think of myself as a person with both feet planted firmly on the ground. Metaphorically. Literally, physically, in real life, I am and have always been obsessed with anything that removes my feet from the ground. If it creates distance between me and the Earth's crust, I want to try it. I love heights. I like the feeling of falling, adore roller coasters. I feel very at home submerged in a body of water due to that separation from gravity. Do you ever imagine gravity sulking on the side of a lake while you swim? I've done various aerial arts, embarked on some impromptu and rather unsafe rock climbing adventures, jumped out of a plane twice, swung off a cliff 1,200 feet above the canyon floor below. And then there's a whole long list of stuff I haven't done yet. Whether because I just haven't gotten around to it, bungee jumping, hang gliding, getting a pilot's license, or because I am physically weak and incapable of doing some stuff. Yeah, as much as I want to soar, if it's prefaced by going to the gym, I'm out. Luckily, while my arm muscles are best equipped for lifting the weight of a sewing needle, my legs have always been just a bit better. Possibly because I did ballet my whole childhood, where me legs had to lift me body off the ground, while my arms just had to look pretty. Stilt walking was not on my bingo card of ways to put space between me and the ground. That is until I went to Disney World. My first trip to a Disney theme park was a tad atypical. I wasn't there with friends or family on vacation. I was there by myself to work. See, with a family of 9, exacerbated by the location smack dab in the middle of the country, equal distances from World in Florida and land in California, Disney was not a vacation we could afford. It wasn't really even something I knew about as a kid. I think I first became aware of Disney theme parks because of Disney theatrical productions, because a friend took me to see the Lion King musical when it came on tour through Dallas, and I fell in love with not only musical theater, but with live entertainment as a whole. I started poring over production photos and announcements and video clips online, which eventually led me to the theme parks and the live entertainment that happens there. And that's how I ended up attempting to plan a family vacation to Disney World somewhere in my early high school years, I think. I was so hopeful that it could happen. If we drove there because we couldn't afford to fly, stayed in a hotel way off property, and never ate food in the parks. Good times. Of course, my best attempts at scrimping and saving still weren't within our budget, so by the time that I left for college, I had still never been to a Disney theme park. And then I heard about the college program. What? I can just work there and get paid to run around the world for 6 months? I was in. So I applied, and it seemed like it wasn't gonna happen, but then it did. I was actually in. I could do a whole story time on my first Disney college program, all the realities, good and bad, of that experience. Heck, I could do a whole story time on my second Disney college program, because yep, I went back. But we're here for one specific story this time. I was stationed at the Plaza restaurant right on Main Street, USA of the Magic Kingdom, with a great view both of the castle and of every parade that goes lumbering towards the hub. This included what was then called the Move It, Shake It, Celebrate It parade. I swear that thing has been rebranded more times than you can count. There were dancers, there were characters, there was confetti, there were stilt walkers. I was intrigued. Eventually I made my way over to Animal Kingdom and saw a similar style of stilt walker in the Festival of the Lion King show there, but doing even more advanced dance moves. How does one learn to do that? I wondered. How does one get hired to do that? There's a hole in this story though, because I don't remember how I found the answer to those questions. I just did. Maybe there was a notice about it on a bulletin board in the utilidors that I trudged through every morning on my way to work. Maybe it was a grapevine thing, heard it from a cast member who heard it from a cast member. However it happened, I ended up with a telephone number and this bit of knowledge. Disney did stilt walking workshops for its cast members. Any cast member in any department anywhere in the park could sign up for a several-hour workshop where they would be taught how to walk on Disney stilts. Yes, Disney has specific stilts. By the end of that workshop, those who exhibited skill could be offered the opportunity to do further training and eventually transfer into an entertainment role as a stilt walker. Others could sign up for a second workshop and keep working on it. And this was the craziest thing because it often wasn't the case. College program participants were allowed to sign up. I must point out that this was 2012, and literally everything has changed since then. It had changed by 2015 when I returned for my second college program, eagerly hoping that I would be able to sign up for another workshop and sneak my way into an entertainment role since I was clearly never gonna get cast as a princess. By then, only cast members who were already in the entertainment department were allowed to sign up for the workshops, so I really did get a timely opportunity there. I called the number that I had received, spoke to a woman, got the time, date, and location of the next workshop, and was put on the list as an attendee. You know, I hate calling people and talking on the phone, but when the reason is putting distance between me and the ground, I grow a lot of courage. There wasn't a whole lot of information provided in advance. Basically, wear sturdy closed-toed shoes and maybe bring a towel or a change of clothes because people were known to sweat heavily in the course of these workshops. So on the day, I packed a small towel and a water bottle and a change of shirt into a bag and hopped on the bus towards Animal Kingdom. One of the perks of the Disney College program, and I do mean perks sarcastically, was a bus service provided for cast members. Again, this has all largely changed, especially post-pandemic from what I hear, but back then, college program participants, along with international college program participants, were all housed in 4 apartment complexes outside the parks. Also, there were some Disney culinary program peeps there, which I know because my first roommate was a chef. We lived together for like 3 weeks before her program ended, and I could not tell you her name, not because I didn't know it then, but because I didn't see a point in committing it to memory. Many college program participants came with cars, which is super handy. Even without AC in my car, I was very grateful to have it on my second program. First program, I had no such luck. I was one of the many, many more college program cast members with no car, who really could only get off the apartment complex grounds via this bus system provided for our use. Like, it wasn't really in walking distance to anything. I think I should note that Disney was not running these apartments or the buses. They had contracted them. They would have, like, cast member events held on campus for us kiddos, but these were not Disney apartments and they were not Disney buses. Also, we paid for our apartments. We paid fairly high rent that was immediately subtracted from our paychecks before we even saw them. The buses were free! Well, no, they weren't. They were the reason that we had extremely high rent. Here's the thing. Without the bus system, the entire college program would not have worked in the way that it did. There would have been no way to get all of these 18 to 22-year-olds to work on time. However, the bus system stunk. It took me an hour and a half minimum to get to work every morning because of all the stops that it made, which I guess is not really out of the ordinary for a bus system of any kind, but yoicks! During my second college program, I eventually moved out of the Disney-provided housing and way further away, and I could still get to work in under an hour during peak traffic. I did get a lot of reading done on those buses though. In the evening, when a bunch of us would get off at one time, they were often so crowded that you would just have to stand there and wait another half hour for the next bus. Unpleasant after a full day of working in the hot Florida sun, but also, I guess, not completely unlikely for any form of public transit. Am I just outing myself as not a fan of public transit? It's a personality thing, not like an actual worldview. We need more public transit. I just personally hate using it. You would get drivers that did not know how to get to the places on their route. I'm not kidding. A kid next to me once verbally guided our bus driver to Epcot. Drivers who showed up late to work, also frequent, meant that you would just be sitting on a bus at an apartment complex with no option but to wait and hope by some miracle you wouldn't now be late for work. I once clocked in 1 minute late and got docked half a point because our driver, who had been extremely late to his shift, decided he was still going to inspect the entire bus thoroughly before getting us on the road. Buses broke down. I was on a bus that broke down right smack dab in front of the Polynesian resort. Those who had gotten on the bus in everyday clothing immediately bailed so they could take the monorail with the guests, but all of us who were dressed for work in our costumes were not allowed to leave the bus by company policy. You cannot be seen at the Polynesian in a Magic Kingdom costume. Everyone left on the bus started calling in. There's one number you call at Disney if you're gonna be late or you can't show up to work, and they pass on that info to your actual work location. I was maybe the third or fourth person to get through to the woman on the other end, and she sighed, asked me how many people were left on the bus, and then entered all 17 of our numbers one by one, noting that we would be late, and it wasn't our fault. No points, at least. Besides taking us to all of the parks and the resorts in Disney Springs, every possible work location, there was also a bus that would take us to Walmart because we were on our own food-wise. There was no cafeteria or anything for the college program. You kinda had to set an entire day aside to do grocery shopping, though. It was such an ordeal. For some reason, they would only take us to this Walmart that was super far away, over half an hour, I think. And then the buses only came every half hour. So you would see all of these college program kids at the checkout line, craning their necks to see out the window if there was a bus coming up, because if you missed it by 1 minute, you were stuck sitting outside for at least a half hour waiting for the next one. I would buy ice cream, because I love ice cream, and then sit on the curb and eat the entire pint right there, because there was absolutely no way I would get it home still frozen. Ah, the buses. I promise that rant was not random. The buses will come into play in this story. So I hopped on the bus that went to the Animal Kingdom Resort, and Animal Kingdom Wardrobe and Rehearsal Facility. That last one is where the stilt walking workshop was being held. On my second program, I would finally visit this building with the purpose of checking out a costume to wear on a shift at DAK. I picked up one at Everest gift shop, I think. But on my first program, there was no chance of needing a DAK costume. Still, I had already been there because that is where all of the on-location Disney World auditions were held. As soon as I arrived in Florida on the very first day of my very first program, destined to be a hostess at a full-service restaurant in the parks, I started looking into the possibility of transferring to an entertainment role. I was a theater student. I wanted to perform. Or at the very least, I wanted to be in entertainment costuming or backstage at a show, doing something in the entertainment department. Spoiler alert, this would never happen. The closest I got to an entertainment role was parade audience control, simultaneously the most enjoyable and most terrifying job I ever did at Disney World. Guests will threaten physical violence against you if you tell them they can't stand there for the fireworks. I knew the Disney audition page well, and I was finally here on location where they happened. I could go to all the auditions. Only college program participants weren't allowed at all of them. Sad day. But I went to as many as I could. Auditions for fur characters, where you would learn a little dance and then mime a story to see how animated you could be. Auditions for face characters, where you would just stand in a line and smile while casting directors stared at you silently and took notes on an iPad. Dance auditions, where the choreographer gets really mad at how many people with absolutely not enough dance training showed up and made a mess of it. Jedi auditions, where hordes of people would be practicing their lightsaber moves in the waiting room, even though all they wanted you to do was a short monologue. Musical auditions, where you had to sing a prepared 16 bars. This one I did not do until my second college program, when I had already graduated from college with a degree in musical theater and about 1 ounce of confidence. So I'd been at the Animal Kingdom rehearsal facility a lot. Most commonly surrounded by about 300 beautiful young ladies, all hoping that they had just the right look for Tiana or Belle or Rapunzel. It's a pretty bizarre atmosphere. great for people watching. But this time I was not standing in a long line of wannabe Jedis or princesses or Mickeys. I was not checking out a costume for an upcoming shift. This is the only time I've ever been in that building for something completely different, and it was really nice because it just had a completely different vibe. There was a decent crowd of potential future stilt walkers there, maybe 20 of us or so. We were gathered into one of the rehearsal studios. Big mirrors lining one wall, thick curtains on the sides, large, tall benches in the back, and given a lot of safety information. They started by showing us the stilts themselves. Nowadays, I see more variety in the types of stilts that Disney uses in their various shows and parades, but the most common and consistently used are still the articulated stilts, which, if I recall correctly, were actually developed by Disney R&D. I'm sure the same style are used all over now, but we were told that the 3-part foot articulation, in other words, the foot-shaped platform that you're standing on being split up into 3 separate parts so you can actually roll through the foot of the stilt much like you would roll through your own foot, was a Disney special. Each stilt weighed like 10 to 15 pounds. So while I think it's assumed that the skill of stilt walking is all about balance, it's actually far more about strength and stamina. You have to be able to lift this long, clunky, heavy piece of apparatus for every single step, not to mention every single dance move. And if you're in a parade or a show, you're likely going to be going long distances or being up on those stilts for like half an hour plus. Anyway, they talked us through how the stilts worked and then how to fall properly. You will fall at some point, and there's a specific way to do so that minimizes the possibility of injury. Then we put on a crap ton of pads and a helmet because safety. This isn't just you don't know what you're doing yet safety either. If you look at any Disney stilt walker in the parks, you'll see that they have pads and a helmet built into their costume. Some more subtly, like Divine and the Thorn characters, and some pretty blatantly. In the Move It, Shake It, Celebrate It parade, they used to wear these massive hats attempting to camouflage the helmets, but somewhere along the road of all the rebranding, they cut those out and just let them wear normal, visible helmets. I mean, I think it's kind of good for kids to see the safety equipment sometimes, you know? Like if a kid goes home and wants to try stilt walking, they're less likely to be like, well, no one at Disney World was wearing helmets, so I'm not gonna either. I must admit though, helmets and knee pads and elbow pads do not help the sweating situation. I'm a pretty heavy sweater. Like back in my ballet class days, I was often able to wring liquid out of my hair by the end of class. Not a pleasant experience for someone with sensory issues surrounding moistness. But I have never before or after in my life sweated as much as I did in the course of that stilt walking workshop. They were not kidding about the change of clothes, although I never got a chance to utilize my second shirt. I looked like I had gone swimming by the end. We finally finished all the talkings and the warnings and the strapping on of pads, and it was time to get up on those stilts. That's the marvelous thing about learning to stilt walk. After a bit of like, yes, I understand the safety precautions, there's really no other way to learn except getting on up there. The tall benches in the back of the room were just the right height for us to sit on, strap our feet and calves into the stilts, and then stand up with ease. I also realized at that point that there were bars, like ballet bars, around the perimeter of the room, but so high up that I hadn't noticed them before. With all of us stilted up, the first step, haha, literally, was just to walk in circles around the room, holding onto that bar. I'm sure it was an amusing sight. 20 people clumsily lumbering forward in a line like giant toddlers. I've always had fairly good balance. We would do balancing contests back in my ballet days, and I would get randomly exceptionally competitive and refuse to lose. So honestly, I popped on those stilts, my head 3 feet higher than it normally is, and I was like, okay, this is fine. I'm all good, this is grand up here. And the weight thing isn't really that bad when you first start and you're just taking normal steps. It's a stamina thing, really. What did trip me up, haha, again, quite literally, was turnout. Or rather, the very necessary lack thereof. I was still fresh out of my dancing days back then, and you don't do ballet for 12 plus years and not come out of it with a permanently turned out stance. I was used to walking like a duck, toes pointed outward rather than forward. So used to it that I wasn't even really aware of it. You can't do that on stilts. Your feet need to be perfectly parallel as you walk, especially to utilize that articulation in the base. You can't roll through the foot if it's hitting the ground on an angle. And also, when you go to step forward, your heel, or the heel all the way down there at the base, will hit against the heel of the other stilt, and you will trip yourself and fall. That was a bit of an adjustment. A lot of actively thinking straight feet, straight feet, straight feet, straight feet, but still, I didn't find stilt walking all that difficult. Most of the participants didn't. I can't remember how long we walked in circles holding onto that bar, but eventually the teachers started allowing anyone who was comfortable to step into the center of the room. At first, I would do it for just a few steps to get around someone who was struggling or going slower, like few steps out and then merge back to safety. But eventually, you'd take those few steps out and then not merge back to safety. It was one of those situations where I could just keep clinging to the handrail and feeling unsteady, because you actually kind of feel more unsteady if you keep holding on to something. But if you just force yourself to let go and get out there, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, this is fine. So yeah, essentially, I learned to stilt walk in under an hour. It's really not that hard. At least, the basics aren't that hard. After a very long time of just walking around, trying different speeds and sizes of steps, learning how to squat, which is a handy way to rest without fully getting out of the stilts, they taught us how to duck under a door frame so that we could go down the hall and drink out of the water fountain. An essential skill. Have you ever seen giraffes drinking out of a watering hole? Yeah, that method actually works for humans on stilts too. 'Twas not the way they preferred to teach us though. Legs apart, head down is kind of just a flexibility show-off. Most people would do this almost curtsy-ish move where you would slide one leg either behind you or out to the side in like a half squat and then bend over to drink. We took a short break after that. I was already soaking wet, but I figured that peeling off my shirt and trying to replace it with a fresh one would be pretty unpleasant in itself. And then we got back up in the air for the second half of the workshop, choreography. Disney has no use for people who can just walk forward in a straight line on stilts. You gotta be able to dance, baby. This is where they decided who had the skills to actually pursue stilt walking as a job and who needed more time or leg strength. Me. It was me. I needed more leg strength. I mean, it didn't exactly help that we'd already been up on stilts for over an hour walking around. My legs were dead, deceased, lacking any feeling but pain. Still, I'm sure that's on purpose. You need a lot of strength and stamina to do this job professionally. The reason the stilt walkers in the Festival of the Lion King are considered to be like on a higher level is that they do full-on side kicks. Leg up in the air with that 15-pound weight attached to it. That takes some muscles. We learned the simpler moves of the Magic Kingdom parade. Stuff like sidestepping, turning in a small circle, balancing on one foot. I was okay until we hit the pivot turns. A pivot turn is an exceptionally easy dance move. So easy that you could argue it's not even a dance move, it's just a person turning around mid-step. I could do the first step. You swing the leg out, plant it on the ground, we're good. Then you have to pivot, which on stilts means you need to rock forward onto the front piece of that articulated base so that you're basically lifting your heels off the ground and you can spin around. Little tricksy, but I was still okay here. Now that you're facing in the entirely opposite direction, that original leg that you struck out with is behind you. You have to lift it and swing it all the way forward, not landing back underneath you, but in the front again like you're taking another step. Y'all, when you are on your own 2 feet, standing on the ground, you do not think about all the muscles involved in that very simple movement. When you are 3 extra feet off the ground with 15-pound weights attached to each foot, you are thinking about every muscle involved because they won't let you not think about them. Yeah, it was way harder than I thought it would be to move my leg that far, and you have to get it a decent distance out in front of you, or when you try to pivot again, the stilts will hit each other and tangle up, and now you're on the ground. So I struggled with that one move. I did okay with everything else. I was having a blast. Despite the sweat, despite the leg pain, despite the sweeping exhaustion, I was on a high. I do not mean to keep making these puns, but again, quite literally. It was just so much fun for me to be off the ground like that. I don't know what it is, but there is just automatic joy wrapped up in taunting gravity. At last, the workshop came to an end. The teachers spoke to those who they thought were ready to move on to further training, and I was not one of them. I was advised to maybe sign up for another workshop in the future, keep working on it. That was enough for me, actually. It was a light at the end of the tunnel, a possibility, however small, that someday I could be in the Disney World Entertainment Department. On top of that, I really had so much fun. I emerged from the building light as a feather in mood, heavy as a dumbbell in body, and soaking wet, only to find myself in the middle of a good old Florida rainstorm. It felt amazing. I was already wet, but this wetness was cold and fresh and delightful, so why not revel in it? Seriously, I reveled in it. I had to wait for the college program bus to pick me up, so while everyone else, teachers and students alike, dispersed pretty quickly, I was left standing in front of the building on my own, in the rain, in the dark. And my natural reaction to the pent-up joy of having spent 2 hours 3 feet off the ground was to literally dance in the rain. Yeah, I don't know how my legs were even holding me up anymore at that point. There was definitely adrenaline involved, but I was genuinely so happy with what I had just experienced that I spent 10 minutes spinning around and singing to myself in a rainstorm in a Disney parking lot. I'd say I've done stranger things in my life, and I'm sure I have, but this probably hits the top 10 list. After 10-15 minutes of acting like a movie character who just cheated death, I took shelter on a bench under the building's awning and started checking the time against the bus schedule that I always kept in my purse. And then I continued to check the time. And then I started to dry off due to the passage of time. And then I started to be worried. Did I mention that the bus service wasn't the best? So another thing that would frequently happen with the Disney College Program bus system is that drivers would just choose to skip stops that they personally felt weren't very important. Stops where, theoretically, most likely, for all accounts and purposes, there surely wouldn't be anyone wanting to get off or on. The Animal Kingdom Wardrobe and Rehearsal Facility, after closing time, was one of those stops that inspired drivers to go, meh, skip it. I believe something like 3 scheduled bus arrivals had passed with no sign of any bus-like object on the horizon before I dug out the "Help me, I'm stranded" number and gave it a call. I am exceedingly patient when the only other option is talking to someone on the phone. But also, it was very well known that this number was pretty much useless. Whoever it was that I spoke to was like, "Oh yeah, there should have been a bus by now. Great. Thank you for telling me what I already knew." And then they were like, "Well, keep waiting." Yay! Did they actually contact a bus driver and demand that they complete their full route without any skips or face the consequences? Or did I just get lucky? I literally don't know. I still waited a pretty long time after making that call. And for those of you who have lost track of the time period, Uber was not a thing back then. I didn't even have a smartphone yet. But at last, a bus turned into the parking lot. I stood up for the first time in over an hour, and have you ever seen those like slapstick jokes in a comedy where somebody stands up and then immediately collapses? That didn't happen, but I don't know how it didn't happen. Possibly shock shot a last draught of adrenaline through my veins because I was hit with the realization that I could not feel my legs. Like, at all. I somehow made it the few steps onto the bus, plopped into a seat with a thud, probably looking like I had been to hell and back. I mean, we're talking 2 hours of extreme sweating followed by a douse in a rainstorm and then steaming in the dark for an hour. I'm sure I was a frightful sight. But then I spent the entire bus ride back to my apartment musing on how the crap I was expecting to complete the decently long walk from the bus stop to my front door, which included 2 flights of stairs, when I couldn't feel my legs. I don't know how I did, But I am here right now telling you this story and not still army crawling my way across a Disney College program apartment complex. So logic says that somehow I did. And the next day I got up and put on my yellow skirt and apron and rode the hour-and-a-half back to the Magic Kingdom and continued being a hostess for the remainder of my program. I was sore for weeks. Worth it. But I wasn't able to book another stilt walking workshop before I left Orlando, and like I said, by the time I returned, the option was gone. I did have the chance to utilize the stilt walking skills I had learned while at college though. I think it was my junior year, and for some reason this only happened once, that someone found out I knew how and produced 2 pairs of stilts from somewhere. They were like the simple kind that people use in construction, drywall stilts. And I was asked if I could do some stilt walking at the halftime show of the big football game that weekend. I tried to avoid ever going out to the football field. Stadium? Not a sports person. No interest here. But I was pretty tickled at the thought of once again putting space between me and the ground, so I said sure. And then immediately had to train a fellow student to use the other pair with no prior experience, which wasn't that hard because she was also a dancer with strong legs and good balance, and also, I'm not kidding, it's not that hard to stilt walk. Though the ground we had to walk on was very uneven, so we both had some near spills. The lack of safety equipment involved would have horrified a Disney manager. Y'all, I auditioned so many times to perform at Disney, and the reality is that when it comes to the coveted face character roles, aka the princesses and such, even if I had looked enough like one of the characters to be cast, I would not have been good at that job. Not only is improv not my strong suit, but also I'm terrible at human interaction and I don't like children. I was also never really at the level they wanted for dancers or singers, so I think stilt walking just stood out to me as an actual possibility, a way I could weasel my way into the Disney entertainment department. If I could just build up some muscle and stamina, I could do this. Actually, my favorite Disney stilt walking roles didn't even exist yet during that first college program of mine. By the time I returned, there was a whole new parade with the most incredible character and costume design, including the thorny stilt walkers. This style of stilt, I love. I want to try it so much. Divine is a character that walks around Animal Kingdom. She's gorgeous, she doesn't talk, she just poses for pictures with people and wraps herself around lampposts and looks really freaking cool. And I think that perhaps is the best role I ever could have done at Disney World. You could even call it my dream role. Not having to talk to people, just towering over their heads and looking awesome. Performing at a Disney park in some way, or even working any entertainment role, was not meant to be. Ah well, some dreams aren't. But I am so glad that I got the opportunity to try stilt walking there, and more importantly, I don't have to be performing at Disney World to get back up on stilts. So, I'm gonna go paint a ceiling. Wanna guess how many times I just shot that? Eventually I'm Hakuna Matata. I'm walking so fast. Holding that entire 15 weight pound in the air. 15 weight pound. All the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies. I'm gonna go paint a ceiling. We're gonna redo that one. That minimizes energy? Fall to minimize energy. I think you're creating energy when you fall. How weird do you think the neighbors would find it if I just walked around the neighborhood in these? The 3 foot Are they 2-part articulated? All right, well my butt had something to say about that. I wonder if I can do the draft thing still. Not without holding on to something. It's been a long time. Yeah, kinda. Did I film this whole thing in my kitchen just for that final bit, because it's the only place where I can actually get up on stilts?